Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be reviewing the Pokemon card set 151, which we currently don't know what it's going to be titled in the West, but it is likely going to be something along the themes of Gen 1, because that, of course, is what the set is all about. And I do believe we also have a set release date for this one, for I think it's September 22nd. I'll have to double check that as of recording this video. But I do believe that is when our next special set will release in the West. But all of that out of the way, we can actually begin the actual review now. So we do have the whole set list in numerical order. So Venusaur Ex is going to be the first card worth talking about. The ability Soothing Bloom is really decent, healing 60 damage, arguably, or possibly I should say, every single turn with enough switches or potentially multiple Venusaurs in play is of course very appealing. It also has 340 HP and an attack which does poison and confusion. So this card is very obviously meant to be played around a kind of like a tanky stall deck. Is it going to be that good? Truthfully, I don't think Venusaur is amazing. However, I don't think this card is complete garbage either. And if we ever see some kind of busted grass type trainer card like Forest of Giants Plants again or something along those lines, then I could definitely see this Venusaur being relevant, because even though the damage is pretty mediocre, it shouldn't matter too much if you're doing poison as well as confusion as well as all that healing. So yeah, Venusaur, nothing too crazy, but nothing terrible either. Next up is we have Charizard EX, which has a decent attack in the form of Detonating Vortex, doing whopping 330 damage, which is of course amazing. You do have to discard 3 energy attached to Charizard though, which is kind of annoying. But I guess the premise here is that you try and use a Detonating Vortex, you discard 3 energy, then your opponent swings into you with their new Pokemon, and then you hit them back with Resolute Wings to do 160. Which is a pretty decent combo in theory, and I have been messing around with this the most in testing out of all 3 starters, with, the Pokemon Go Charizard, as well as Blastoise from Pokemon Go as well, and like a funky kind of rogue meme type of deck. And this card is very fun to mess around with, but I honestly don't think it's going to be too crazy until we see some additional fire type support. It might be better in a slower format, to be honest, but it's just kind of getting the energy on there. And, if you're putting into play a Pokemon Go Charizard, that's obviously really awkward because it means you need 2 Charmanders and then a 3rd Charmander for the following turn, potentially. So it just kind of gets a bit awkward when you're juggling stage 2s. But yeah, I could definitely see Charizard being good at some point. Then we have Blastoise EX, which arguably might be the most solid of the 3. It has the ability Solid Shell, saying it takes 30 less damage from attacks, and the attack Twin Cannons, which you discard as 2 basic water energy from your hand, and you do 140 for each one. So you can theoretically do 280 for just 2 energy, which is of course amazing. Lefty lets you one-hit KO all those V-Stars and a good chunk of the EX Pokemon, which is really cool. However, Blastoise is kind of in this weird spot where it's not really as good as Chien-Pao in most ways. Like, Chien-Pao arguably has even further one-hit KO potential against VMAX, as well as having the burst potential being a basic, whereas, Blastoise is kind of reliant on Aridas to find rare candies and such. It's not saying Chien-Pao would struggle without Arida, but, Blastoise isn't perfect, I guess, in that sense, because it is a stage 2. However, the rewards are pretty good for being a stage 2 Pokemon, so I could definitely see Blastoise being pretty good at some point. Immediately, though, I think it's a little bit underwhelming, unfortunately, especially since, the mid-evolutions and the basic is pretty underwhelming. And that's really what sets Gardevoir apart, in my opinion, right now, is that Kirlia is so good as a draw engine. But with, the likes of Blastoise, Venusaur, Charizard, we have to incorporate other draw engines, basically, just to keep them consistent. So next up, we've got a Caterpie that hates other grass Pokemon for some reason. We have a Metapod, which is fine. A Butterfree, which is... Yeah, Butterfree is pretty bad, actually. We've got a Weedle, a Kahuna, which is okay. I think Kahuna's actually prevents Sableye from placing damage counters on it, which is kind of interesting. The Beedrill for 2 colors does 30 damage, and if you don't have any cards in your hand, this attack does 120 more damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned, which seems pretty decent at first, but Hisuian Arcanine can do 160 and is stage 1, and doesn't need any energy attached, and hits a more relevant weakness, and doesn't see any play. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. Now, Polaris is of course very strong, but, this is stage 2. even like the same or less HP than Arcanine. Just seems pretty bad, to be honest. So then we go to Pidgey, which has got a Corfu family attack, always nice to see. A Pidgeot and a Pidgeotto, and then a Pidgeot. Fly 150, flip a coin of tails, attack does nothing. We've seen these attacks all the time. They're not great for a reason. They're just nothing too special. We also have a Rattata, which is like a slightly worse Farfetch'd from Brilliant Stars, I believe. And then a Raticate, which has the attack second bite, which honestly isn't the worst thing ever. I think this Raticate could be a decent one-off in something like Zorkbox, to be honest. It's pretty decent as a finisher. Now, unfortunately, Zorkbox does have a ton of finishers and 2-hit KO potential. It never really has 1-hit KO potential due to like how high the HP has gotten in recent years. But, you know, Raticate could definitely get you there with 2-hit KOs, so I kind of like it. We've got a Spearow that can evolve during your first turn, which is amazing in terms of GLC because it not only means that you could use Fearow on your first turn going second, but it also means you could use this Fearow from Sun and Moon, which says your opponent shuffles their hand into a deck and draws 3. So if you're interested in colors GLC, it's kind of super niche at this point, I guess, but if you are interested in that, then that's a fun little fact. But aside from that, I don't think this line will be seeing much play in Standard. Next up, we have Ekans, which has a strangely good attack for an evolving basic. That's something I've noticed with this set, is that they seem to be introducing more and more of these basics that do like 30 damage plus an effect, which is kind of, it's very powerful for an evolving basic to do that. But, Ekans. We also have Arbok Ex, which I did mention in a previous video, but we'll just go over it again quickly. Menacing Fangs is pretty decent disruption, but, how are you getting 3 Dark Energy on there is my biggest problem with this card. Yeah, you've got Dark Patch, you've got Raihan, but that's kind of slow and tedious. So, yeah, not terribly optimistic about this card, but I could be proven wrong. It could be really good. So, just keep an eye out for Arbok EX. Discarding cards from opponent's hand, especially with Iono and Path to the Peak in the format, could be very, very disruptive. Next up is we've got the Pikachu Raichu line. Raichu is, I'm just looking at this card quickly. Yeah, it's pretty bad, unfortunately. We've got a Sandtree that says trainer cards in your opponent's discard pile can't be returned to the deck by the effect of your opponent's item or supporter cards. Basically they can't play like a pal pad to shuffle in supporters, which is cool. It also just refers to trainers in general. So like if you play Arizona's backup to retrieve a stadium, then that wouldn't work either. So there is actually some interesting applications for Sandshrew. I definitely like this card. I think it's probably too niche for Standard currently, but definitely as like a tech in a certain deck maybe in the future. Could be pretty cool. We also have a Sandslash, which is, pretty underwhelming. We have Nidoran Female, I believe that is. Otherwise, I'm going to fail biology. All right, no, never mind. Got Nidoqueen. So Nidoqueen, Queen's Press, does 90 damage and prevent all damage done to Pokemon by basic Pokemon, which is quite nice. Obstagoon did see a bunch of play, but admittedly, Obstagoon had a really solid ability as well, so it's kind of hit and miss whether or not this card will be actually as good as Obstagoon was, to be honest. We also have the Nidoran Male line with Nidoking, with the ability King's Vigor, which is actually pretty decent. If Nidoqueen is on your bench, this Pokemon attacks cost no energy. And 190 for free and poison seems really, really good. But it does mean that you need 2 stage 2s in play, which seems brutally awkward to try and achieve by turn 2, because that's preferably when you want to be attacking in this game. So seems unfortunately a bit too slow for Standard, but could be a fun budget deck to try out nonetheless. Next up, we have Clefairy, which is going to be immediately outclassed by the Clefairy from Lost Origin. Regardless of how good Luna Invitation is in attack, still think Clefairy from Lost Origin is significantly better. And we have the Clefable, which will not only be an interesting option in Clefable GX, but also with Clefable EX, I should say, but also the Clefable from Lost Origin, Clefairy, as well as, Zorkbox. So it has the attack additional moon that does 50 damage, and if your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by damage from its attack, take 1 more prize. Really solid. Just take an extra prize, and of course Zorkbox playing the new reverse energy to get 3 more energy definitely means you could probably finish off like a V-Star or an EX for 3 prize cards. So yeah, I would definitely keep an eye on Clefable. Vulpix is a Vulpix. Ninetales has amazing artwork and the attack Mirrored Flame, but it's just really not doing enough damage. You could play Judge and Copycat, but at that point, you're kind of just playing a worse version of something like Arc Path to the Peak with Giratina. So feels bad, to be honest. I really wish Ninetales had been better than this, but unfortunately the case, and I can't really defend this bad card. Jigglypuff is Jigs. Wigglytuff EX is actually kind of cool, has the ability Expanding Body. If this Pokemon has any special energy, it gets plus 100 HP. So you have 350 HP, which is more than the Stage 2's EX have, which is kind of wild, and it has the attack Frenzied Tackle, which does 90 damage, and if you played a supporter card from your hand during this turn, this attack does 90 more damage. So your damage output is obviously terrible, but assuming you can just play a supporter every turn, and assuming you have a special energy, which should be relatively easy, such as, double turbo, I guess, or something like that, then this seems like a really solid tank and hit deck. You could even try using Armorage Basin to loop with Charon's Care and then do funky stuff through that and heal and reset Wigglytuff in one turn. That sounds kind of cool, to be honest. How good will that be in theory? I don't know. I guess in practice, I should say. I'm fumbling words today as usual. But, I think this card is actually pretty solid for an EX Pokemon. So out of all the EXs, honestly, from this set, this is definitely one of the more powerful ones. Next up, though, we have a Zubat, which is, it's got a cute ability, Full Vision Echo is actually kind of cute. Says when it's in the active spot, you can just force the opponent to reveal their hand. Is that relevant or great? Probably not, but, it's cute. We also have a Golbat and no Crobat because this is, of course, Gen 1. Skill Dive, just not doing anything. We have this Oddish Gloom Vileplume line. I've seen a lot of people kind of like this combo. I'm personally not sold on it because by the time you get to Vileplume, it's probably turn 3, assuming you didn't get the rare candy turn 2. And if you have to rely on Gloom on those earlier turns, then only seeing the top 3 cards of your deck feels like, well, it just feels really bad, to be honest. Like, Electricity Generator can fail you from looking at the top 5 cards, and Gloom only looks at the top 3. So you probably have to play northwards of 16 plus energy just to hit 1 Gloom or something. So just feels kind of bad to me. Plus, there's no Scoop Up Net, so it's not as if you can just loop these turns after turn, but maybe there is a hidden use for Vileplume. Maybe this is how we power up Charizard and Venusaur and all the rest of them. So I'm open to ideas, but honestly, I'm not too sold on this combo just yet. Next up is we have Parasect, which is kind of funky, get some grass Pokemon. So in theory, you could use Parasect to get out 2 Venusaurs and then maybe set up a third one manually on the bench. Is that going to be too slow? Probably, but, could be a fun challenge, to try out maybe. I don't know. I'm looking for ideas here, guys. Venomoth with Distraction Powder is basically Item Lock and Confusion, which is kind of wild because Banette EX is pretty good in Zoroark Box, but that's obviously a Stage 1. I know I said Stage 2 there, but Banette EX is a 2-prizer is what I meant to say there, whereas Venomoth is a single prize. So there's like pros and cons to both. I think Venomoth, honestly, the pros outweigh the cons, especially because you can find it with Level Ball, which makes it really splashable. So yeah, definitely another Zorbox tech card, I guess. We have a Diglett and a Dugtrio, which are horrendously boring, and that sucks. We have a Meowth, which is okay. We have a Persian, which allows you to find a Giovanni's Charisma, and admittedly, I think that supporter is pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as, once during a turn, we're going to have to find a Giovanni's Charisma, and I'm going to dedicate deck slots to a Persian line. Maybe you really want to use Persian, but honestly, it doesn't seem, good. Psyduck has the attack Overthink, which is pretty annoying, but I don't think it's too relevant in Standard right now. Golduck is, well, it's just worse Clara. Mankey is Mankey. Why did I stop at Mankey? I don't know. Primeape, Primeape's bad. Growlithe hates water types. Arcanine does an absolutely whopping 240 for 4 energy, which is kind of wild, but you have to discard 2 energy. How are you getting them on in the first place? Yada, yada, yada. Same kind of problems with most Stage 1s, unfortunately. Then we have a Poliwhirl, Poliwag, Poliwrath line. No Palpitoad, because it's the wrong generation. Poliwrath is... yeah, it's pretty bad, unfortunately. Come on, you gotta give me better cards than this. We've got the Alakazam EX because Kadabra finally returned to the TCG. And Alakazam EX honestly has really solid potential, I think, in Standard. Dimensional Manipulation says this Pokemon can use its attack even when it is on the bench. So the whole idea here is you probably promote something like a Mimikyu or a wall Pokemon like Snorlax to prevent retreat, and then you just use Alakazam EX on the bench. Now, it is fairly low maintenance, only requiring 2 Psychic Energy to get going, so we should be able to get there pretty quickly. But still, of course, it is a Stage 2. Stage 2s are always going to have problems in Standard until Pokemon fix, the evolution rules, or they do something with trainers and make the format slower, I guess. But I do think Alakazam EX has really solid potential. Then we have a pretty sad Machamp line because like basically Machamp wasn't revealed before this full set reveal, so I naturally assumed that maybe Machamp was actually going to be a pretty good stage 2. I was kind of wrong, unfortunately. Ability Guts, from anime reference though. If this Pokemon would be knocked out, it's one of these flipper coins. If heads, it's not knocked out, and its HP becomes 10 HP instead. Now, what's interesting about this ability is that it doesn't have the wording of if this Pokemon would have full HP and would be knocked out. So if this is actually the correct translation, then theoretically one Machamp could live forever, which is very, very funny if this is the case, but I'm personally holding out shadow of doubt that that's not the case with Machamp, but Mountain Chop is also just a worse version of Gargankel's attack, stage 2 from Paldea Evolved, which sucks, so yeah, Machamp, sadly not doing it for me. Bellsprout, some amazing artwork. And we have a Victory Beal, which is kind of funky, but at the same time, your opponent just needs to retreat, and then the effect is removed. We have a Tentacruel, which, that's just bulk. Geodude is pretty bad. Graveler is also pretty bad. We get to Golem EX. Everyone hoping for a good Golem card, finally. Unfortunately, it's going to have to wait a wee bit longer because unfortunately, I don't think this card is particularly great. You can set up a really cool 2-hit KO with Dynamic Roll and Rock Bomber, but of course your opponent just has to force a Gust Switch or something and then promote something else. They could, there's different ways they could maneuver around this damage, and of course you only have 330 HP being a stage 2, so you're kind of awkward to set up, if that makes sense, and things are going to get pretty awkward pretty quickly being a stage 2. And if you want to use Rock Bomber, you need Fighting 2 colors. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. It just seems like pretty awkward stuff to make work. Is it the worst Stage 2 EX? Probably not. Is it the worst EX? Absolutely not. But, still not a particularly great card. Then we have Rapidash, which is, I believe, another card that was saved for the full set reveal, and it's just pure bulk. Slowpoke is bulk. Slowbro is also bad bulk. We got a Magnemite that kills itself, because why not? We have a Magneton, which has Junk Hunt, but it is a stage 1, so that's pretty grim. We have Farfetch'd, which is basically a theme deck card. We have Doduo, which is bad. We even have a Dodrio, which has a very similar ability and attack, if not completely identical to Unbroken Bond's Spiritomb, which is one of my favorite decks to play in the Sun and Moon era. So very happy to see that return. Unfortunately, the extra HP comes at the cost of being on a stage 1. Now, the ability Rampage Draw is pretty solid utility. Of course, it will power up Raging Beaks, but also just drawing a card occasionally is nice. Unfortunately, we do have other stage 1s, though, that kind of just act as better support engines like Curlia, so I don't think Dodrio will be seeing that much play, but you never know. Could be a fun card. Then we have Dugong, which is just kind of bad, unfortunately. We have Grimer, which is also kind of bad. Maybe okay in control, actually, but yeah, nothing too crazy. We've got Muck with Sticky Jail, which could be kind of annoying in some kind of Zoroark box control deck, but other than that, not too great. We have a Cloyster that's bulk. We have a Haunter Gengar line, which is kind of interesting. What have we got here? Poltergeist. Yeah, I think this is kind of cool, but unfortunately, it is a stage 2, right? It's a stage 2. That's going to be something that's repeated a lot throughout this video because it just kind of sucks, but it's also the truth. This is a cool card, by all means, and it will be a very fun budget deck to play, and I will make a video on it, and I will enjoy playing it. But it is a stage 2. Poltergeist can be played around, and Horror Attack is only doing 110, so yeah. Also, having 130 HP in this day and age should be a crime, but, Gengar, unfortunately, going to be pretty bad, and I think, maybe. I don't know. Seems pretty bad. We have Onyx, which has Thumping Avalanche, another one of these meme attackers, which is going to be pretty fun to mess around with. Obviously, nothing too crazy or competitive, but still pretty fun. We have a Hypno that says once in your turn, you can just leave your opponent's active Pokemon asleep, which is relevant to Jinx EX later on, so do keep this card in mind. We have a Krabby, which is, well, it charges itself up, which is nice, but Kingler isn't doing anything. We have an Electrode, which is basically Whimsicott, I think, from one of the Sword and Shield sets, like Vivid Voltage or something. So Electrode is kind of cool. It's got like a combo of Leftovers and Snorlax, so that's cool, I guess, but still, damage scale's kind of slow in this day and age, and yeah, don't think it's going to be too great, but it is probably going to be like a fun rogue deck to try out for sure. Then we've got Execute, which is kind of funny. It's just a funny Pokemon. Executor is pretty bad though. We've got a Cubone, which is kind of interesting. I think Mara could be like its own single prize budget deck kind of type thing. Maybe more so a pre-release league promo, like smaller league challenge style of deck rather than League Cup, but still think this could be a pretty fun deck. We have Hitmonlee, which is pretty bad, unfortunately. Hitmonchan, a far cry from its base set counterpart, that was amazing. So, yep, those cards are pretty bad. Lickitung admittedly says during opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't even attack, which is super annoying. Does force a retreat or an evolution, but still, I don't think this card is that great, all that aside. Coughing and wheezing, I'm just depressed. This isn't detention gas wheezing. Explode Together is kind of funky, but it is on a coin flip, so it's not reliable. And then Spinning Gas is pretty fun spread damage, but of course, it is only 10 damage spread in a format where, Pokemon have 300 plus HP and are competitive and good. So, yeah, I think Weezing could be fun, honestly. It could be a fun little troll deck, and it's funny that Weezing was a troll deck in the Sword and Shield era, and it's about to be a troll deck in the Scarlet and Violet era. I find that quite funny. But yeah, Weezing, definitely a fun card, but nothing too crazy. Then we see the Rhydon line. Charismatic Drill does 180 if you play the Giovanni's Charisma. Sounds pretty good in theory, but of course, Giovanni's Charisma only accelerates one energy, so Charismatic Drill, unfortunately, I just don't think is doing enough. Tramsy is actually a really fun card. You could piano it back into the prizes and then flip a coin of heads to take one more prize. Could be pretty funky. Also combos with Clefable, as far as I'm aware, so I definitely think Chansey could be a fun card to mess around with. Tangela is just not doing enough damage. Kangaskhan EX is terrible. It's pretty funny, but it is terrible. Just flip 4 heads, whatever you do. We've got a Horsey Seadra line, but no Kingdra. Forget Kingdra's not in Gen 1. So unfortunately, this is not going to be very good. We've got a Goldeen, which is pretty. We've got a Seaking, which is actually does have a swim freely attack, meaning you can use Finion to charge this guy up. But Dugong just shuffles the energy back in. So I'd much rather use Dugong and conserve the energy than risk it all, put all my eggs into one basket, so to speak, with a Seaking. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't see Seaking being that good. Starmie is kind of funky, but you have to discard it, so there is no option to shuffle it back, which would have been ideal for this card. So it's kind of just being rendered to Flapple from Rebel Clash or whatever it was, and that didn't see a whole ton of play, so I don't have high hopes of Starmie, but you never know. We also have a Mr. Rhyme, which has the ability Mimic Barrier that says if you're this Pokemon and your opponent's active have the same number of energy attached, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon, which is actually a pretty interesting ability. It's obviously very splashable in Gardevoir because you can just control the amount of energy you put on there, really, with Gardevoir just accelerating a whole load. So I don't think this card is terrible, honestly. I think it's definitely one worth keeping an eye on, especially like Chansey. I think this could be a decent basic somewhere down the line. We've got Scyther, which is terrible. Jinx, which has the attack Bottom Kiss. If your opponent's active is asleep, it's knocked out. Just why not, I guess. The problem I've got with this card is even though Hypno is obviously very good synergy here, is once you evolve Drowsy into Hypno, there's no real way to retrieve Hypno again and loop the combo, so feels kind of bad, but this is definitely going to be a funny meme deck to try and rack up wins on the ladder, so can't fault it for that. At least they tried with this one. Kangaskhan is obviously pretty bad, but this one's at least a bit fun. Electabuzz and Magmar are, they're pretty bad. We've got Pinsir, which is like a grass type attacker potentially for Lost Zone box, I guess, and maybe GLC, I guess. I haven't really been talking about GLC and I should have done, but I'll probably save that for a different video. Pinsir, yeah, not sure it's that good, but could be a decent grass option. We've got Taurus, which has a rage attack, and that's just power crept out of the game completely. We've got Magikarp, which has a very funny attack that could just let you deck out, which is hilarious. Gyarados, I honestly don't see the synergy with Gyarados. I know some people have said like you could pair this in a control deck maybe, but honestly, it just seems kind of bad. Milling the top 5 cards of your own deck. I don't know. Just seems kind of bad. Lapras, yeah, pretty bad. Ditto is cool, but it has to be in your active spot on the very first turn of the game. So I'm a little bit concerned about how good Ditto actually is, but I still like the card and I think it's pretty creative. Eevee does actually set up 3 different Pokemon of different types, which could be cool, especially to replace VIP Pass when that eventually rotates. But yeah, Eevee, I don't think it's too great, but either way. We've also got a Vaporeon. So all the evolutions in this set have the exact same second attack, does 180 if they're EX or V. And that concludes my review of them because they're all terrible. Porygon can change your opponent's weakness. Eevee, Eevee's not like they're not terrible, right? But they're not amazing or anything. We've got Porygon, which can change weakness, which is very very cool. I do like cards like this, but unfortunately, it's not particularly great. Omanyte. We have Omnistar, which prevents the opponent from retreating, which sounds pretty cool, especially with Aqua Split doing decent spread damage. But unfortunately, there is a Snorlax from Pokemon Go, and since Snorlax combos so well with Challenge Care, it's kind of hard to make an argument as to why Omnistar would replace it, but I guess you could make an argument, so will be fun to mess around with this. I'm just saying, it will be a fun card, but it's not going to be anything too crazy, probably. We do have a Kabutops, which changes weakness to 4 times, which is hilarious. This card will be very fun with like Ludicolo and like all these silly Pokemon that do like 50 damage. I'm suddenly going to start carrying V-Stars, which is hilarious to me. But yeah, Kabutops, definitely a fun card. Aerodactyl can just want to kill Gardevoir EX, which is hilarious, or any other Stage 2 EX for that matter. I would definitely pay attention to this Aerodactyl. I think this could be very scary somewhere down the line. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on that card. Snorlax can retrieve leftovers, but leftovers is just a bad item. Articuno, pretty bad. Zapdos, decent spread option with Regieleki EX, but again, I'm honestly just not seeing it with this card. I've been kind of swayed to believe it's not great. Moltres, probably not terribly great either. Got a Dragonite, which is, I mean, you can tell I'm just skimming through these last ones. Like Dragonite, yeah, bulk. Mewtwo, gonna have to throw to the bulk pile. Mew EX, very, very good card. Do not underestimate this. Genome Hack, choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks, uses this attack, and then the ability Restart. I have great faith this card could see a whole bunch of play, so I would definitely keep an eye on this. It's not saying like pick up 4 of these or anything, but definitely keep an eye on this card. We also have Energy Sticker, which is basically Turbo Patch. Flip a coin if heads, attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Aqua Patch, but any type and on a coin flip, effectively. Can also attach itself to benched Pokemon, so it's not just restricted to basics, which is really cool. So I do like Energy Sticker. Is it going to be great? Probably not, but could be pretty fun. Snatch Arm, I think, is pretty bad, to be honest. The old Helix stuff, I think they're all just as bad as each other, to be honest. There's no like real winner, and they don't really matter because they just evolve into Pokemon. Safety Goggles removes weakness on basic Pokemon, which I dislike. I'd rather weakness was still kind of relevant because it means more counter decks can appear, but excuse me. Safety Goggles, nothing too crazy, I don't think. Big Balloon says it's stage 2, has no retreat cost. Very, very few stage 2s would probably want to use this. Rigid Band reduces damage to stage 1 by 30, so Oinkologne, Wigglytuff combo. Leftovers, we're not going to talk about leftovers. Erica's Invitation, I think, is pretty strong, but it will rely on your opponent obviously having a basic. So you do have to make that correct judgment. Maybe you play a Zubat or something. We use that Zubat from earlier. So there is potential here, I guess, but, seems kind of awkward at the same time. Giovanni's Charisma seems pretty strong, but I honestly don't think this is going to be like a welder or anything like that. It's not going to be a staple. Daisy's Help, draw 2 cards, look at your face down prize cards. This really should have just been draw 3. Seems pretty bad. Bill's Teleport, because apparently Bill just teleports now. Look at the top 8, take any number of Pokemon. Okay, that's kind of cool. That's definitely like a buffed up Great Ball by quite a lot, to be honest. So I kind of like Bill's Teleport. In Evolution Heavy decks, this could definitely be like a very fun card. And then we also have Cycling Road, which is decent, to be honest, as basically a Radiant Greninja. But yeah, it's been Power. Thank you for watching. And yeah, let me know what you think down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.